on the panel today, Mr. Daniel Murphy and Ms. Meghan Callahan. Thank you so much for taking the time out to connect with our students as we talk about the engineering industry and a little bit about what students can expect as they go forward trying to navigate their new career paths. We're going to dive in deep today, guys. So thanks for logging in and for taking time to prioritize your career and your career development. This session should be about an hour in length. We're going to go ahead and ask the panelists some questions. And then from there, if you have any questions, we're going to open the floor up. But I'd like to first start off by kind of giving an introduction, an overview of each of our guests that we have here today. And again, we just want to thank you so much, Dan and Meghan, for taking your time. And I know time is really precious. So thank you for sharing your expertise. So first, I'm going to give introduction of Mr. Daniel Murphy. He is the Assistant Superintendent for the Facility Operations Branch within the House Office Buildings jurisdiction. In this role, he supports the House of Representatives through management of the mechanical, electrical, and elevator systems. Additionally, he manages the sustainability, energy conservation, and environmental compliance responsibilities with the House Office Buildings. Dan grew up in Delaware and attended the Catholic University of America, which is here in Washington, D.C. He graduated in 1992 with the Bachelor of Electrical Engineering, and his career started with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers in New Jersey as a construction project engineer. He worked on various military construction projects, including office building renovations and new construction of a hangar facility. In 1997, Mr. Murphy moved to Virginia and became part of the Pentagon renovation project team. He worked on many projects, including Basement Segment 1 and the remote delivery facility. In 2000, Mr. Murphy transitioned to the Pentagon Building Management Office, where he is responsible for the electrical systems of the Pentagon. In 2002, Mr. Murphy joined the Architect of the Capitol as a project engineer in the House Superintendent's Office. He worked on projects such as emergency lighting for the House office buildings and the Longworth Emergency Generator Project. In 2004, he was promoted to Assistant Superintendent for Facility Support, overseeing programs such as fire protection, capital improvement projects, and safety. In 2006, Mr. Murphy transferred into his current position as Assistant Superintendent for Facility Operations. Mr. Murphy enjoys baseball, travel, and visiting national parks, and has made many road trips where he has been able to combine both of these interests. So thank you again, Dan. And Meghan, I'm going to go ahead and give you an introduction here as well. Meghan Callahan is Lead AP Director at James G. Davis Construction. Meghan's early exposure to the architecture, engineering, and construction AEC industry began as a student at the Catholic University of America. While focused on her Bachelor of Science in Architecture, she spent a summer as an intern at James G. Davis Construction Corporation in 2000. During this time, she was an integral part of the 800 F Street project. This award-winning historic renovation would ultimately serve as the pivotal project in which Meghan's interest in construction would begin. She pursued additional courses in construction management and engineering while completing her BS in 2001 and continued to earn her Master's of Science in Architecture in 2002. Upon graduation, Meghan joined Davis full-time. Having spent her entire career shaping the landscape of Washington, D.C., she has built a solid reputation as a leader in the industry. She has worked on a variety of projects, including the historic Woodward and Lothrop building, the highly secure Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosive Headquarters, the international law firm Hogan Lovells, and most recently providing her expertise to a world-renowned confident client as they build out their new 400,000 square foot space. Currently serving as director for Davis's law firms and professional services market sector, Meghan thrives on challenging, fast-paced projects. She is a solutions-oriented professional with over 20 years of experience with a long history in client satisfaction. Her unrivaled attention to the details is just one of the many reasons why her projects are such a success. Her genuine passion for connecting with owners and end users, leveraged with her expansion and her expansive architectural knowledge, is what makes Meghan an esteemed asset to any project she is a team member of. In addition to building a reputation and accomplished career, successful director, and being a successful director, of one of the largest general contractors operating in Washington, D.C., Meghan prioritizes her work life. When she is not mentoring her team or managing multifaceted projects, she enjoys baking sweet confections for special occasions and traveling to exotic destinations to meditate and practice yoga. So I want to take this time again to say thank you both for speaking with our students. And at this time, I just wanted to let you all know that we are recording this session, so that way any students who are going to be attending the career fair coming up at the end of the week, any of those registered students will have a chance to also view this recording since they weren't able to all make it to this time frame. So that will be available to them as well. I also wanted to let the students know that because you participated in this session, James G. Davis Construction and Architect of the Capitol will have your resumes for further review as you plan to segue into the career fair at the end of this week. So with that being said, we're going to go ahead and jump into the questions. And I know that I went over your bios and we went through your background, but if you could each just kind of share with us a little bit about your journey and your experience and what kind of led you to really want to pursue your career within this particular industry. I'm going to start first with Meghan, and then I'll segue over to Dan.
Sure. Thanks very much. So as you read in my bio, I started my career really in the architectural school at Catholic University, and I had held a few architectural internships over the course of summers at that time. But my internship with Davis was sort of life-changing for me in terms of moving away from a career in design and focusing on a career in construction. And I really, think about that experience as one where I was only limited by my own desire to learn and any sort of self, anything that was going to hold me back was really about my own desire to take on more responsibility rather than the afforded experience. The internship at Davis for me was about, exposure to a variety of disciplines within a construction project that really opened my eyes to what it is that we do in construction management and in, really in this industry, and got me excited to do something more than just draw designs, but really build buildings and build spaces that people call, their office and spend a lot of their daily lives in.
Mm-hmm. That is too cool. That is too cool. Thank you. Dan, we're going to segue over to you.
Okay. I kind of fell into this industry. When I graduated Catholic in the early 90s, I studied electrical engineering, and my thought process is that I would go into the budding computer industry. The internet was just starting to really come around, and that was where I expected my career to go. But just industry being what it was, IBM had a massive layoff at around that same time, and the market was flooded with engineers who had more experience than I did. And I found a job with the Army Corps of Engineers and just fell in love with the construction industry. It wasn't me stuck behind a desk. It was me walking job sites, talking to people, figuring out problems and solving them, and keeping the project going, and then actually having that physical project done at the end to know that I worked on that I'm part of that building because I was there during it. And then, so I said, I moved upward in projects, was in New Jersey, decided I wanted to come back to the DC area, and I found a position working with the Pentagon on that renovation project in the late 90s and 2000s. And that was fascinating because this was a building of like historic proportions that needed, to be renovated because it hadn't been changed. A lot of the plumbing and electrical were from the original construction, which was done in the early 1940s. So that was a fun project to get involved with. And then I saw an opportunity at the Architect of the Capitol. And so I'm like, okay, going doing projects, once again, historic buildings, seat of government and all of that stuff. And then, I found that not just building those buildings, but helping to maintain them, extending their life, being involved in how the systems work, how everything has changed. Because when you think about the Capitol building, it was, started construction in 1793, well before there was indoor plumbing, electricity, air conditioning, elevators, Wi-Fi, or any, telephone. So having to take those existing structures and adapt them for the modern world is one of the great challenges that we are dealing with today.
Yeah.
And I find it fascinating of mixing that historic, that architecture, the systems, and, moving things forward. And once again, leaving a legacy for others to come behind and see that was something that I helped do.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I love how both of you were just kind of speaking towards how you have developed this love and passion for a career that essentially, like you said, Meghan, kind of, you make the spaces that we call pretty much home for most of the day throughout the entire week. And there's a lot of thought that goes into what you do, both of you, Dan and Meghan. And I just think that's fantastic that you have that passion for that. And your job also aligns with the humane aspect of us. And I think that's wonderful. My next question actually kind of falls into that. In your throughout your career, I'm sure you each have had opportunities to mentor or to develop individuals. You have employees that work for you. Can you tell me a little bit about some advice that you would give college students about the importance of having an internship while they're matriculating through all 4 years, and even finding a fellowship or an internship opportunity upon graduation if they are working on their master's or pursuing a postgraduate degree? Dan, I'm going to start with you, and then I'm going to segue over to Meghan.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So when I got out, I hadn't done much as far as internshipping. When I did summer jobs and learned a lot about self-importance and self-awareness and, being independent on doing that type of work. But when I got out into the real world, I was very lucky to come across a boss who did provide me that mentorship, who pushed me, who challenged me, and kept me growing. So having learned so much from him and through that process, I've been trying to make sure that I do that for everybody else that I meet who's just starting out and coming up through our ranks. We have a usually very robust summer internship program, which got canceled last year, and I believe it's also going to be canceled this year because of the pandemic. But we have always found great resources through that program. So going out there and doing that, whatever job it is, whatever thing you are interested in, getting that exposure, whether it is through an internship, a volunteer program, your first job, a summer job, a neighbor, whoever you can find that can be that mentor and that guide. It's very important. And building those relationships and those connections that you have. We didn't have LinkedIn when I started out, but I now find that LinkedIn provides a lot of those points and those contacts. I've worked a lot with Catholic University students in the past. I work with the Bush School now as well, and I'm constantly getting, referrals from people who had gone to Catholic, who have, heard me through venues like this or through the Bush School or others to say, I want to learn a little bit more. Can you, connect with me? And I don't know anybody who says no. Everybody wants to be able to help out the next person behind them. And find that person, find that goal, find that person that you want to be like when you grow up. And I'm still looking for those people today as well, and still trying to connect and learn.
Thank you. That's great advice. Thank you, Dan. Meghan, I'm going to segue over to you.
Yeah, and I'll echo some of what Dan has just said, but I think for me, this recommendation or advice really starts with a piece about what our industry is, and that is that we build buildings, but we build relationships. And that cannot start too soon in your career. As Dan's speaking about mentorship and opportunity, you never know where ultimately your career is going to take you. I think I'm an example of, I never thought that I was going to work in construction. I thought that I was going to be a designer. And one summer really changed that for me. But ultimately, some of those relationships that you make along the way can, facilitate new opportunities for you within your career down the road. And so an internship may not always lead to that initial full-time employment, but you're likely making connections in that internship that help you understand the industry more broadly, that helps you understand that company specifically or that trade specifically. Oftentimes I work with interns and project engineers just coming out of college who have had varied experiences. So they may have had, as a new, a project engineer starting their career, exposure to multiple trades within our industry prior to figuring out that what they were ultimately interested in was being the general contractor. And sometimes that changes in the opposite direction, where we have interns who come to Davis and have a great experience at Davis, but really get excited about a particular trade on a project that they're working on, or people that they are working with on a project level, and what that ultimately can open in terms of a future for that individual. And I'll also add that, as a former intern myself, I didn't know where I was going to be 5-10 years down the road, but there are relationships that I formed, not just in ultimately the internship that led to my career at Davis, but also within my architectural internships where, those people who I worked with and for at that time ultimately became partners on future projects. And so you don't know where things will lead, and all of that experience helps you figure out and hone your own career path. And part of that is really just about exposure and opportunity.
Great information, great feedback. And I guess that really all of this is so good because it's tying right into the next question. It's been doing that all day with all of the different industries. It's been really nice. But I guess my next question is, do you have any tips for best practices for interviewing? And Meghan, I'm going to start with you, and then I'll shoot on over to Dan.
Sure. I think any interview is your opportunity to share with whoever you're interviewing with, who you are, both as a person and as an employee. So, the more comfortable you are in that setup, the better. We are in a time now where many of our interviews are done virtually over Zoom. And so taking a few minutes to collect yourself beforehand so you're not rushing around from what you were previously doing is always helpful. And doing some research about the company as well as the people that you're interviewing with. One of the things that we typically do is share with all of our candidates prior to an interview who they're going to be meeting with. We try to share a variety of positions or market sector exposure within the interview process, and understanding who those people are, doing a simple LinkedIn check to understand, what exposure or what experience these people have before you sit in the room or virtual room with them can be helpful. And understanding more about the company that you're interviewing with is important. One of the things that I seek out in an interview of candidates is an understanding of what they have, understanding what they know about our company so that I can share more than just what's on that website. But certainly having some awareness of what each company that you're interviewing with, their key market is, and where that work is occurring and what their specialties are is very important.
That's great. Dan, I'm going to segue over to you.
Well, Meghan stole my answer. So, but
bound to happen at some point.
Yeah, I will just start out with that as well, is that when you're applying for a position, you want to make sure that you are putting your best foot forward. So definitely checking your resume, making sure that it is spot on for what it is that you are trying to tell that particular company, that particular person, of who you are and why you would be the great fit for them. Because I know from my personal experience, I have been on with interviews that have had 80 applicants.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a matter of trying to go through and weed out who it is that we're going to interview.
Mm-hmm.
And so it can be that volunteer experience that you did that went, wow, that's kind of cool. I want to at least talk to that person.
Mm-hmm.
I want to they've shown that they have that caring, that commitment, that passion of people that we're looking for to be part of our team.
Mm-hmm.
And to get onto that. One other thing, just as a quick note on that, is do not send your resume by Word. Send it through as a PDF, because I've gotten so many by Word that have been scrambled due to the formatting when I pull it up on my screen, which is therefore, once again, not putting your best foot forward.
Mm-hmm.
And then said, as Meghan mentioned, research who it is that you are interviewing with, the company as well as the people. If you don't know who the people are, make sure when you're getting the interview request, you ask that question, find out who they are, look them up on LinkedIn, look them up on Google, and find out a little bit more. So once again, you can make sure you're making those connections.
Mm-hmm.
I had one applicant who, back in the 2008 Googled me and found out a lot of stuff, so that when it got to the end of the interview, when we got to that open-ended, tell me more, you have any questions for us, he started asking me questions about things that he had found out from my Google, or from his Google of me. And I'm just like, if he's doing that much research, if he's putting in that much effort for just this one interview, what is he going to do when he's working for us? He's going to put that level of effort in, that level of passion to making sure that he has covered everything. And I'm like, that's the guy I want to hire.
Mm-hmm.
And so those are things as well. LinkedIn is a great tool now, because you can look that person up and see if you have any mutual connections.
Mm-hmm.
And if you do, you can reach out and say, hey, Meghan, you know Dan Murphy, what can you tell me about him that I can use to help me get, through that second interview or whatever it takes to get my foot in that door. You want to make sure that you're building that network, building those connections. Make sure you've got questions to ask them at the end of the interview to show that you have done your homework, that you are prepared, and that you want to be part of this team.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah, go ahead, Meghan.
I have one other thing to add that I was just thinking about as Dan was describing, in particular, the volunteer experience that a candidate may have. And that's that we have all started a career with zero experience. And oftentimes when you're pursuing an internship, you may feel like you don't yet have the experience that you're seeking. And don't be intimidated by that. I would look towards opportunities where you have volunteered, or your ability to speak about how you have worked with others or collaborated with others to help display what your skill set is going to be in that work environment, as well as show things that you are truly excited about. As Dan was speaking about that, I was reminded of some of my intern and new hire candidates as we talk in an interview. That's when they get the most animated, and that's when I can understand what truly excites them and what they're going to bring to the table to be a key member of our team. And so the more you can think about those things going into an interview for an internship, the better, and try to capitalize on, how you would be part of a team, or how you can work in the workplace to gain that experience.
These are fantastic nuggets of gold, great information. And I hope students, I hope Cardinals, you guys are taking some notes, because this is really awesome. The next question that I have for you guys is with regards to just the space that we're in with COVID-19 and how it has affected not just the nation, but it's affected us globally in this global market. And I wanted to know how you feel the pandemic has impacted internships and jobs, and what are some ways students can go about securing experiential learning that is beneficial to this industry while they're waiting for that next opportunity. I'm going to start with Dan, and then I'll go over to Meghan.
Sure. So as I mentioned before, I'm working with the Bush School right now. They have a master's program, and one of the things that we identified that happened because of COVID is that we can't do on-site training of our people anymore. So we have a lot of tradespeople that need regular refresher on the National Electric Code or the plumbing code, or just helping with their own career development. So we started saying, okay, we need to develop a better program. And so we're working with them to help us find opportunities to give some of that same training virtually. And so it's a matter of, okay, here is something that is an industry that was a kind of a pocket industry that was more niche, that is becoming more mainstream. And therefore having those tools that those students will be generating of learning how to deal with that, how to build on that, how to make that work for them is something that is something that we don't currently have, that we are trying to grow. And I expect that area to grow more quickly in the future. So that's one area where the COVID has definitely changed some things.
Yeah, absolutely. Meghan, I'm going to segue over to you now.
Sure. So I think as Davis looked at 2020 and our internships, we work on a cycle where in the fall we are typically recruiting for next summer's class of interns. And so as the pandemic hit in 2020, we already had a class of interns, and rather than cancel their experience working with Davis and our experience working with them, we sought out ways to get creative. And so we had what we called a hybrid internship program last summer, where we split the internship program into a remote session, and then we were able to safely implement an in-person session for a portion of the summer as well. And so the remote session was not tangible, active project work, but we were able to partner current employees with teams of interns to expose them to a mock project and really try to share some of the benefits of what that internship program could have been in person. We are still forecasting that this year we are going to be able to hold in-person internships. And part of that has to do with the planning that we make so far in advance for our program, and that we're limiting that class size of internship opportunities this year. But that's not to say that there aren't other opportunities for internships or for experiences as you're asking about. I think to piggyback on what Dan has described, companies across the market are coming up with additional education for our own employees as well as for the industry. So reaching out to a company that you are interested in an internship with that may not have an active program, may have other educational experiences for you and a means for you to make those connections sort of remotely. The other thing that you as Catholic University students are somewhat uniquely positioned for is that you're going to school in Washington, D.C., where there is a very strong construction or engineering networking opportunity within the industry here. And so seeking out organizations like the Washington Building Congress or DCBIA and doing some research about the type of education that they might be offering or networking events that they may be offering is a means to, again, gain some information and knowledge, but also potentially make some connections with people that you wouldn't otherwise be able to make those connections with, since we're not necessarily in person.
Yeah. No, that's good. And actually, it all ties in. And you guys answered a little bit of the last question with it. And I think that for the student who, or I guess the graduating senior, right, who maybe they haven't found anything yet, or that company that they really, wanted to be with, they're stalled right now. What advice would you have for that student, not the one who's looking for, let's say, like the internship, but the one who's looking to now start their career, and it's just like, they're interviewing and they're anxious, and they hear everything that's going on with the news, but they also know that their faculty have connections. They have had interviews. They have been networking. What advice would you give a graduating senior that is in this position? Literally within the next couple weeks, they'll be taking those steps.
Sure.
I'll start with Meghan, and I'll segue to Dan.
Yeah, I would start off by saying, one of the things about the job market in general and, the construction industry specifically is that it isn't constant, and there are going to be ebbs and flows within the marketplace throughout the course of your career. And so broadening what you're willing to consider can be really beneficial, give you a year or two of experience that you might not have otherwise pursued if that one company that you really wanted to work for didn't have as many positions this year or opportunity for you. And you never know, again, what could lead to ultimately a different career path or a better route towards the career path that you had intended. So I would say broadening your horizons, looking beyond sort of that initial silo that you might have been pursuing could be helpful. The other is not to give up on it. I think that part of what companies are responding to with the pandemic is finding the balance of hiring the right numbers of new employees and keeping our workforce engaged and, ensuring that we have personnel right out of college that are able to grow into the leaders that we need 10, 20 years from now, right? Mm-hmm. And so that might not be as many opportunities as you would have hoped for, but companies might be making decisions in a different pace than they would have a couple years ago, given the difference in the marketplace. So being patient is part of it, and staying in front of some of the connections that you might have made throughout the interview process. If you are getting interviews and speaking with people, asking them, following up, asking questions, and even if it doesn't lead to a project, it might lead to, or a job, it might lead to a mentorship opportunity for you. Mm-hmm. And so, looking to solidify relationships can be really beneficial too as you start your career.
Nice. Very nice. Thank you. Dan, I'm segueing over to you.
Sure. To piggyback on a lot of what Meghan was talking about is that you guys are young. We were young once, a long time ago for me at least, and the industry has changed a lot. And in the engineering and sciences, it will continue to change. That is the only constant we have. Mm-hmm. So what you're expecting to do today, there might be a newer opportunity 5 years down that nobody had even considered or thought of today. Mm-hmm. So always keep an open mind, always try new things, see what's out there and what interests you, because it is a life, it is a career, but you're going to be doing it for a long time. Mm-hmm. Be happy doing it. So mm-hmm. find the things that you enjoy and chase those things. So it might be that, yes, I studied engineering, but I really liked, for me, I liked history and architecture, mm-hmm. but I wasn't good at that. So I went the engineering route, but I found a way to integrate the history and the architecture of where I am and what I'm doing, mm-hmm. but also utilizing my engineering skills while doing it. Yeah. So always follow your passion.
That's good. That's really good. And so I have one final question before I open the floor up. And at that point, if you guys have any questions, students, please feel free to ask them. And this last question that I have for you, how do you see the industry evolving overall as a whole? Meghan, I'm going to start with, actually, I've been piggybacking, so I'm going to start with Dan, and then I'm going to go back over to Meghan. There we go. Okay. Go ahead, Dan.
No problem. So while Meghan builds the buildings, my industry is the one who operates and maintains them going forward. Mm-hmm. So one of the issues that we're still trying to tackle is that when the pandemic hit and everybody went to more of a work from home, style of work, mm-hmm. the question we've got right now that we're still trying to understand is who's going to want to come back? Mm-hmm. And how do we keep the people who do come back safe? So we're trying to integrate both the understanding of what amenities that we're going to be needing to provide for the people when they come back, but how do we keep them safe?
Mm-hmm.
And so there are a lot of people, a lot of industry studies, scientists and others who are looking at how much air exchanges do you need? What's the right cleaning, chemicals that we should be doing? What's the right frequency of cleaning that we need to be doing? Because it's not just about COVID, it's also about the next one.
Mm-hmm.
And how do we keep everybody safe?
Yeah.
So that is that's the biggest question mark right now for my part of the industry is where do we, what will people want? What will companies want? Because they're seeing that they're getting the production without necessarily needing to pay for the real estate.
Yeah.
And so how do they balance that? And it's a challenge.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. It's good. Meghan, on to you.
Yeah, I think that's a great topic, Dan, and it's something that I'm seeing in the private developer office marketplace as well, is clients evaluating if they're building new offices, is it for every employee to sit at a desk 5-6 days a week, or is it for them to have hoteling where people come into the office certain days of the week or on an as-needed basis? And as you're speaking about, what are those amenities and how do we make it safe, and what are the upgrades that are needed either for existing buildings where we're building new office space or that new development. Beyond sort of the pandemic, what we are seeing more and more in the construction and construction management end of things is a push towards integrating technology, not just on a planning perspective or a design perspective. We do a lot of virtual coordination among our MEP trades in particular as we are approaching a new project, but how we can automate more of the work that is happening on our project sites or engage with technology to be more efficient on our project sites. And we're seeing more and more tools being developed and tested and rolled out on our project sites to help us with efficiency. Little things like before the pandemic, we were hearing about touchless elevators and the elevator dispatch protocol where somebody pushes a button, you get in the elevator, it goes to the floor that you need to go to when you swipe your card. And some of that is happening on a faster cycle because of the pandemic to minimize the amount of human interface on certain elements, and some of that is happening as technology among different trades is developing further.
That's interesting. That's very interesting. Thank you. And I think kind of going towards your point, Dan, about finding your passion, going after your passion, and Cardinals, as you hear just how your industry is evolving, you can kind of take away what they're saying and do some research on it and kind of see how maybe moving forward, as you follow your passions and you follow this industry, you may find those niches and those pocket holes that might be a good place for you to start your career, or as if you're already working on your postgraduate degree and you're already a little bit in your career, likewise, you can still see how maybe there may be some alternatives to the career development that you're trying to pursue moving forward. And so I want to take this time, first of all, to say thank you to Meghan and Dan, and thank you for answering those questions for us. And I'm going to go ahead and open the floor up at this time for any questions that you all may have as Cardinal students for Meghan and Dan.
Well, I've got one for Meghan to start off with.
Okay, sure.
Great.
Yeah. So Meghan, I know I've had some conversations with some of the folks in the engineering faculty and others about this is, what they're looking at, what is it that will help Cardinal students become more attractive in the industry moving forward? And I know I've talked with them about certain certifications that they can get as students that will make their resumes, rise higher on the list of people that you guys are looking for. And I mentioned, you have the lead GA that people can go out for as a student and understand that and be able to do that. The EIT is another one that students can obtain and making themselves, more attractive or more, help their resume stand out to be pulled out of that pile that you get every year. Are there other things that you are seeing that our students can do while still students that might help them?
That's a great question, Dan, because I think some of the certifications that you just spoke about are great answers to that question. The other piece of advice I would share is to follow up with communication. So don't just send the resume into the HR address, but follow up with a separate email or a phone call and respond to that communication promptly when you do hear from HR departments, because oftentimes decisions can be made quickly in terms of how to refine their pool. I think you also spoke a little bit about this in preparing a resume, understanding that one resume may not be the right resume for all of the opportunities that you're pursuing. And so how can you tailor that or tailor your experience to ultimately each of those companies would be another piece of advice that I have. But I think you hit it on the head in terms of certifications that are most easily pursued and achieved that can help you stand out in the marketplace.
And to piggyback on what you said from a communication standpoint, when you get that interview, after the interview, follow up with the panel as well. Thank them for taking their time to meet with you.
Definitely.
And why you are interested and that you are now even more so with their particular company or organization, and why you feel that you are a great fit. It gives you an opportunity to once again hit on something, because I don't know how many times I leave a meeting and 5 minutes later I'm like, oh man, I wish I had said. And therefore that email follow-up gives you that stuff. And I will tell you, I've also gotten it actually in paper where somebody took the time to handwrite that letter and back to me. And once again, it shows that you care enough to do that. And if you're trying to stand out, those are things that help you stand out.
Definitely. It reminds me of, I had a candidate who I interviewed with who connected with me on LinkedIn afterwards, thanked me, did that, right? But then a month or two later, they had gone through other interviews and circled back with me, again, not as the HR group from Davis, but as a potential team member, and asked me a few more questions. And that's the sort of thing that it's not the HR group that's going to hear from you as candidates, but the fellow employees that are interviewing in that process that can be both great resources for you and also great advocates for you. If you've made that connection with me after an interview and you had a few more questions or you had a few more thoughts that didn't make it into that conversation, that's going to stick with me as an interviewer, and I will have a follow-up conversation with HR, and that's the sort of thing that can, again, set you apart from the pile of resumes.
Absolutely. 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 Great information. Do we have any other questions? I know that actually they might not want to ask it, but I was having a conversation via email with one of the students that are on, and their biggest question that they had was with regards to international students and trying to find opportunities in the midst of everything going on. If they've been looking, if they've been searching, if they've really been, and they've had interviews, but it just doesn't seem to really pan out. And so what advice would you give to that CUA student who's an international student and they're recently graduated, they have the GPA, they have some of the internship experience, but they're just not really landing any opportunities, especially since the pool is a bit smaller for them as far as searching is concerned.
I'll jump in then, Dan. I think that I would probably go back to expanding the opportunities that you can and circling back with those who you have had interviews with. If you've gotten feedback that is non-definitive, that is we're still evaluating or we haven't made final decisions for the year, professionally following back up, you don't want to be too much of there's a fine line, right? You don't want to follow up daily or anything like that, but finding a great way to reconnect with those individuals can be helpful. And also reaching out and saying, if you're not the company for me, do you have any others that you know of that might be looking for a candidate like me? Can also be an effective way to expand your opportunities.
It's good. It's good.
From my perspective as a government employee, we do require for in-house hires or hires within our agency are U.S. citizens. So while you might be an international student, we can't hire you unless you become a U.S. citizen. But that doesn't mean that a lot of our contractors that support us couldn't hire you. And so it's a matter of, once again, as Meghan was saying, it's just that, okay, I understand you can't, but do you know of others around who can do that? And a lot of people have found opportunities that way.
That's good. That's really good. Do we have any other questions that any students would like to ask at this time? If not, I want to just take the time to say thank you again to Meghan and Dan for taking time out of your busy schedules to connect with us. Seriously, this information and the expertise that you're giving our students, the time and the consideration that you're taking to pour into them really means a lot. And for the students that were on this call today, if you would like to further connect with Meghan or Dan, please just email careers@cua.edu. And in the subject line, if you could just put "Let's Talk Engineering," I'll see it. Some of my team members will see it, and we'll be sure to get you in touch with them appropriately. And then from there, if you would like to make connections with their organizations at the career fair, there will be some one-on-one schedules that are open, as well as some group sessions that are taking place. So if you haven't already registered, make sure you register for the career fair. We currently have over 57 organizations that are going to be there, and we have over 215 of your colleagues that are going to be there. So make sure, if you haven't already, it's a great chance for you to continue to move in this prioritizing of your career development. And we are going to go ahead and close out here. But once again, I want to thank you guys for your time. And as we follow up with everything, I'll make sure you all get a recording of this, as well as some of the promotional materials that we have, as soon as we fix that AL on the end of the other one. Thank you so much. And I hope you guys have a great rest of your week.